My inheritance has cost me. The car and gadgets are nice. And I've almost gotten used to the smell in the cave. It's the criminals. Since my father died, they've focused their attention on me.
Hey man, somebody killed this lady.
And the people around me. My father's enemies have gotten more twisted with age, more violent and suicidal.
Crashing this plane with no survivors.
Because they know their inevitable end is near. They've seen Batman die. They've seen each other die.
I can't believe they killed him. Yeah, man, things are getting really bad out here.
The Riddler.
This puzzle is far more than any mere game.
Dr. Death.
You and I go way back, Batman.
Two-Face.
I still believe in Harvey Dent.
All gone. Like the life I hoped for beyond this mask. Everything I have, everything I am, is because of him. I'm the Batman's daughter. I am the Huntress. And tonight, I'm hunting the man who destroyed my life.
Hello and welcome to the Huntress Podcast, number 38. I'm Ashford, and along with me is Laurel. Hello, Laurel.
Hello, Ashford.
And we also have Diane. Hello, Diane.
Hello, Ashford.
All right, so we're back. The Huntress Podcast. And on this episode, we're going to talk about Helena Wayne and Batman Family number 20. Laurel, can you give us the credits to this one?
Sure. It is Batman Family number 20. Came out in July 1978. The issue is entitled Trial by Fire. Paul Levitz is the writer. Joe Staten penciler, Bob Layton inker, Todd Klein letterer, Adrian Roy is your colorist, and Alan Milgram is editor.
I love I'm reading this on the DC Universe app, and just the way that they clean up the art. It didn't need it, but I'm just saying it's beautiful. I love the pencils on this book. I love the way that Helena Wayne looks when she's in her civvies. Just spectacular. Diane, can you give us the synopsis to this one?
Absolutely. Batman Family number 20. The Huntress has been captured, locked away in a fiery room in an abandoned building in South Gotham. The Huntress must fight for her life. Tightly bound to a chair, the Huntress quickly considers her options before the flames consume her. Deciding to use the restraints to her favour, the Huntress manoeuvres her body and succeeds in smashing the chair on the ground, loosening her restraints. Making her way towards the nearest window, the Huntress notices her escape has been reinforced with steel bars. Reasoning that the steel bars are a new addition to an old concrete foundation, the Huntress opts to use the weak foundation to loosen the steel bars from their position and make an opening for herself, quickly making her escape. Back at her flat, the Huntress enjoys a hot shower to cleanse herself of sweat and soot and begins to plan her next move. Helena Wayne reasons that during the time that she was unconscious, Franklin Gresham could have removed her mask and recognized the Huntress as Helena Wayne. After all, they met at a dinner meeting not too long ago. Realizing the risks she posed to herself, Helena Wayne decides it's best to stay dead until she learns more about Gresham's motivations for the South Gotham fires and gathers enough evidence to expose his federal scam. A week passes and neither Gresham nor the Huntress nor Helena Wayne are to be seen. Once Gresham feels confident the Huntress won't be coming for him, he comes out of hiding and proceeds to give federal employees a tour of South Gotham in order to progress his initiative, Federal Grants. While touring the rickety old building, Gresham falls through a building's floorboards and straight into the building's basement. There, the Huntress awaits. Shocked to see the Huntress is alive and well, Gresham panics as the Huntress confesses she is aware of his housing scam and plans to expose him using a firebomb he planted in the building earlier. Deciding to return the firebomb to Gresham, the Huntress tosses it back to him, only for it to land on the floor and set off. Gresham is immediately engulfed in flames as the Huntress watches him burn helplessly. The next day, the news media informs the public of Gresham's tragic death while giving a tour in South Gotham, prompting the federal government to fund Gresham's housing project. At the law firm of Cranston, Grayson and Wayne, Arthur Cranston comments that as a public interest group they must work to make the federal government more responsive and without any fatal stimuli, like Gresham's tragic death. Helena Wayne agrees with him, but is secretly not mourning the death of a murderer 100 times over. And this concludes Batman Family number 20.
That is quite the story we have to wrap up these. I guess, would you consider them 3 issues? Because they are 10 pages, 12 pages, something like that, to wrap up our story here in this one?
I would say it's a self-contained story, just split in 3 parts.
What did you think of this chapter?
Oh, you're asking
yes,
me or
no, go ahead,
Ashford?
you.
Okay. Personally, I thought it was a great wrap-up for the story itself, because the entire story was Helena Wayne, investigating a real estate scam, or a federal government housing scam, rather. And, she finally finds out who's actually behind, the fires, and it's actually the city councilman. And then, the final installment of the story sees her actually dealing with, with that discovery, as well as, okay, how do I capture this man? How do I, get justice for the people of South Gotham? How do I, pin this crime to him? How do I... So this whole issue is her really figuring out how to get the evidence to prove that, hey, no, the city councilman is running a scam here, but it doesn't quite go as planned. So this actually results in her first casualty. So I like the fact that the story, sees Helena Wayne, trying to figure out, how to arrest a man who's already in a position of power, but it doesn't exactly go the way that she expected. And so how she responds to that is perhaps my favorite part about this, because even though she establishes at the very end of the story that she would have saved him if she could have, she also makes it known that she doesn't feel bad that this man actually died. She kind of sort of smiles about that. Which is kind of interesting, to say the least.
I enjoyed it, but I wish that somehow these 3 stories could be collected in one book, because I think it would read really well. Because when you just read this, it feels like, oh man, that wrapped up pretty quickly. But if you kind of think about the overall story it told, it's well done. And even though this was wrapped up quickly, it still had its individual parts. It was like, oh my gosh, how will the Huntress get out of this one? And then, she had her in her civvies time, and then we saw some villainy. So it had its own little different parts, but it felt like one big denouement, if you will.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, we did have some nice balance of scenes here. The action scene, the downtime, and then our finale, which it was a nice structure considering, it's short, this little piece. And Paul Levitz has definitely succeeded in breaking these up, because he does have to tell us in some sort of flashbacky moments here what has come before. But it didn't feel like he was wasting my time, even because, having read it in the past, with how they used to have to do that, catch people up, because it might be your first issue, so they had to make sure they did that. I wish they did that a little bit more cleverly today. Actually, this works out really well. But this opening action scene, Ashford, what did you think of it?
I thought it was cool how it was it was a part within a part. So she gets out of it and you're like, oh my gosh, I can't believe she got out of that. And then when she goes for the window, it has these steel bars. And I like the commentary in that where, well, one, we could have been impressed just that she got out of the chair tied up. Also, I had to remember, oh yeah, at the end of the previous vignette, she was knocked out. So she wakes up in the chair and about to be burned to death, right?
Mm-hmm.
Okay, so I had to, remember that. And then when she gets out of it, we could have left it at that and just been impressed. But when it's like, oh no, the window has these steel bars. I like the commentary behind that where it's like, okay, in South Gotham, it's, it's forgotten. It's easy for us to go in there and rebuild and sell condos or whatever. And she goes like, man, everything in this place is run down, but these steel bars are new and improved. And it sounds like kind of commentary about like, it's a rundown neighborhood and, we're going to build state of the art jail cell, like jails, liquor stores, that kind of stuff. But we're not throwing libraries down there, Whole Foods. So it made me kind of think about that. But then when she's like, well, wait a minute, the bars might be brand new and improved, but the foundation surrounded behind it is still sketchy. So I thought she thought her way out of that.
Mm-hmm. Diane, I'm curious. You have more experience with this. She says she's using her crossbow is basically a crowbar to pull out knock over some of these steel bars because they're like Ashford was saying, the cement around them is old and crumbling. Do you know this? I don't know what vanadium or whatever it is, steel that she's talking about. Is that something that she uses before or after this? Is that something unique to her crossbow?
She's basically stating that it's a steel crossbow or a metal crossbow, so it's a metal alloy as far as I know. And so she uses a metal crossbow, and since it's very sturdy, she's not worrying about her crossbow actually breaking while she's removing the bars. So yeah, and the one thing that I noticed about the crossbow is that it's branded. It's got the Huntress logo on there. So I guess it's a custom made crossbow. So we don't actually see that on panel, but yeah, the crossbow itself, it's a very different crossbow from the one that we previously saw. You remember from both DC Superstars number 17 and also during the her first issues of All-Star Comics, she had a blue crossbow. So here she's got a brand new crossbow that's actually looks kind of gold, but it's actually made of a very different metal, and it's even got the Huntress logo on there. So I think that that first crossbow was probably a temporary crossbow, and this is her more permanent crossbow that she's using. But yeah, it's made by a specific type of metal, but it's actually a metal alloy as far as I know. It's not an actual real metal.
Okay. Yeah. I thought maybe it was going to be like vibranium or something, some sort of a made up comic book thing, because she used it and it didn't bend, her crossbow. And it is much larger, like you're saying, than the one she had before. So that's curious. And yeah, the branding, I'm sure she learned that from her father. Everything has to have the bat symbol on it.
Yeah.
Well, in her case, she's got the stylized H from her belt buckle onto on the crossbow. So yeah, she uses the same exact H symbol for Huntress. So yeah, it's actually quite clever.
Yeah, the whole thing was clever. I think you had mentioned, on Twitter, that she Black Widowed her way out of this by smashing the chair, falling back on it.
Yeah, I remember that in that first Avengers movie. If you remember, Black Widow was actually being interrogated, and so she was also bound to a chair in a similar way that Helena Wayne is bound to a chair. And so when she finally got the opportunity, because she kind of had to think her way through that scene, she was like, oh my god, this place is on fire, I can't get to the door, so I have to think of, how do I get out of this chair? How can I make this chair work for me? And so that's when she actually decided, oh yeah, I can just maneuver my body a certain way. And she kind of did a bit of a flip in that one panel sequence where she managed to smash the chair somehow without breaking her arms in the process. But anyway, comic book physics, she didn't snap either her spine nor her arms doing that maneuver, but either way, she smashed the chair on the ground, and by doing so that helped loosen the ropes around her body. And so I'm not sure why she had to burn them, as I think she could have easily gotten out of them, but I guess the ones the ones holding her wrists were probably not affected, so she was probably burning those ropes. But yeah, I like that throughout the whole sequence she's actually thinking about, okay, how do I quickly get out of this situation without roasting alive? And at one point she remarked that if the fire doesn't burn me, the heat will kill me. And I'm like, yeah, but the carbon monoxide would have killed you first.
Oh.
So, yeah.
Well, and the fact that she's not got a fire retardant cape, because she mentions the cape caught on fire, so she has to ditch it.
Mm-hmm. And that's something that she'll replace later on. She also ends up with fire retardant boots later on, but that's in the Joey Cavalieri era. But yeah, she does eventually, make modifications to the suit so that it's actually fire retardant, but that happens, like I said, during Joey Cavalieri's run. That's not something that happens during Paul Levitt's run. But yeah, she ditched the cape to not catch herself on fire, which was actually a smart move. But yeah, I was kind of, surprised that she didn't think of the carbon monoxide poisoning, because that's usually the first thing that will kill a person before the flames get to you. Because it binds to your blood and it prevents oxygen from binding to it. So if you're not getting any oxygen, you basically suffocate to death first.
Wow.
Gruesome. So, Ashford, you like downtime scenes. What did you think of this little interstitial where she's trying to contemplate her next move and she's out of the shower with the bathrobe on?
To me, I loved it because I feel like the way some of the characters are drawn now, it looks like they're 19, 20, 21. And I mean, maybe she was 19, 20, 21 in that scene, but I felt like she was a grown woman, already kind of, accomplished, knowing where she wants to go. So I felt like she just looked like a leading actress to me. She just looked like a leading lady. Like, hey, we're doing this backdoor pilot with these Batman family issues. Now, let's give her her own book. So to me, that's why I felt like it was cool. And I think if I picked these up in 1978, and like, oh, okay, I'm reading these Batman stories and then I'm reading this, I would think like, hey, okay, what is this about? And I was talking about this on another podcast where when Cassandra Cain first sets up shop in Bloodhaven, it's like, okay, yeah, now I got my own town. I'm going to man the whole place down and all this stuff. Like with Denise Huxtable, okay, I'm leaving this. I'm going to a different world. I'm going to be on this TV show now. I'm at this college. I got this dorm. This is where I hang out. These are my new friends. This is my new world life. So I like that whole aspect of it. And I just love the art.
Do you think it's overly sexualized, though, with the bathrobe being open to, real deep down into the waist, the way she's sort of posed with her legs all exposed? Do you think that's too much?
I think that, and I think the costume in general is too much. So I think just on the off, I mean, all of it. So I guess I didn't really think about that too much, because there's certain parts and certain shots where when she's in costume, I'm thinking, wow, she's really exposed. Mm-hmm. So I guess since I had already mind blocked that or whatever, or accept that into this world, I didn't think much about the bathrobe thing. But you know what? It is kind of jarring because she just had this near-death experience, and then it gets cut to, hey, I'm darn near naked, mm-hmm. where it looked like she should have, like, maybe, like, man, that was messed up. I almost just died there. What, like some more reflection, but I don't know.
Diane, what about you? What did you think of this with the bathrobe?
I also thought the same thing you did the first time I read this story a couple of years ago. I noticed that, she was showing quite a bit of skin in those panels. And I'm like, yeah, back in the 1970s, they also sexualized their female characters, but not in the same way that female characters are sexualized today, where they've got, porn star breasts and exaggerated curves.
And wild poses.
And wild poses, cheesecake poses, I think is what those are called. But yeah, she's sexualized to a degree, but she's not, overtly sexualized. She still has a natural looking body for a 21-year-old woman, and she's, she's kind of posed, very sexily in that one when she's sitting in the chair. She's got a sexy pose there, but it's not too cheesecakey. But yeah, I did notice a bit of sexualization of the character in those panels that you're describing.
Yeah, it bothered me. I was sort of like, just tie it a little bit better. That's all I ask, The rest of it, I can understand, because she's kicking back in her own house. She should be able to relax.
But you know what the issue is we shouldn't see that. Like, it's like this was almost so intimate, we shouldn't be there.
Mm-hmm.
That's why it was odd.
Yes, that's exactly right. That's what it is. It's just, she's hanging out in her own room. She should be able to relax there privately. Exactly. I did like that she's very frustrated about what to do because she's worried, I forget the bad guy's name, Gresham, if he might know that the Huntress and Helena Wayne are the same, and he could be giving away her secret identity if she should show herself as either character, or either persona, I should say, and she throws the knife into, I guess it's the chest of drawers. I just love that. That was awesome.
Well, see, and that's what I was so wrapped up in. Like, I was really wrapped up in the whole, like, hey, he may know my secret identity. So, like, that whole conversation she was having with herself. So, if I go out, then he knows, oh, well, she's still alive, so we got to get to her. So, I might need to lay low. So, I guess I was so wrapped up in that. And I loved and remembered the knife throw. That's why, with, I guess, her being overly revealing, I kind of glossed over that.
Well, you know, there is some good art touches on this page, if you can, because I like the panel construction here. You've got the 2 blocks. You've got her breaking the panel with that one shot. Of course, I wish he wasn't quite like that, but it was neat how it works. It makes the page flow down. And then we've got the close-up on her eye. And then when she does throw, we've got these narrow horizontal that really make it stand out. It really makes it pop for me. I have to say, the art on that really worked for me.
And I just love the part down the middle. I mean, with the hair. Mm-hmm. I just love it. So.
You like that hairdo?
I love it.
We talk about 90s hair when we're doing the Bertinellis right now, so we've got 70s hair. You like it better.
I like it. Over at the For Who Rule of Seinfeld podcast, I somehow got suckered into making it a dual Seinfeld Friends podcast, and Courtney Cox had the part down the middle, and I was like, I love it. I love it.
Well, the next thing she does is we do get just a little bit. I wish we had a little more of this, of her hunting down Gresham and sort of trying to get the goods on him, so to speak, trying to find the proof that would help her expose him. So I guess expose him before he can expose her. I'm not exactly sure how she was planning to make that happen until I suppose she set this trap up for him in the end. Did you think we got enough of her detective skills here, Diane? I was curious if she ever went around in a disguise as well as sort of sneaking around as Huntress. I would have enjoyed seeing that.
I do think off panel she probably did not, if she actually went out as Helena Wayne, she, made sure not to look like Helena Wayne. She probably dressed differently, probably did her hair differently, probably even wore a wig perhaps. So yeah, we don't actually see that on panel, but I do think that, the fact that we see her working behind the scenes here, we see her primarily in her Huntress costume here, but she's staying out of sight. But I am wondering about one particular panel sequence, and that's when she jumps on top of the car. Did absolutely no one notice, a 100-pound something landing on top of that car? Because it would have definitely made a loud noise, and it would have definitely been felt. And they're just talking like nothing
where's
happened.
The kathunk? Very true. Very true. There should be a sound effect there, and they should be like, what was that? That's a big bird.
Let me ask you something.
Go ahead.
Did I read this wrong? Okay, so did I read this incorrectly? She was on the roof, and they were down there talking, and she was picking up what they were saying.
Yeah, you're right. That is an awful long way away, isn't it?
So that's, I remember like really looking at that panel, like, oh, she might have like some speakers or something, a microphone, but so I was like, I mean, I accepted it, but it made me go back and go, whoa, did she have a device?
Yeah, I would have, like I said, enjoyed seeing a little bit more how she was doing this. I think there could have been another page for that, maybe tighten up somewhere else. Maybe this Gresham, when he goes on and on about how he's going to have them come fund this part of the city and that's going to make him governor and yada yada. Maybe we could have slimmed down there and had a little bit more of her search. I believe that she's the one that cut this hole in the floor that he ends up falling through, because I think that was a trap planned for him, and I'm sort of curious how she knew that he would be the one stepping on it, because that would be interesting if it was one of these other government types that stepped on it. But again, it's not exactly clear. I don't know, do either of you have an opinion on this? Was this a deliberate trap?
I do think that it was a deliberate trap, considering where the Huntress was. So she knew where he was. She absolutely knew where he was going to land. But I think the reason that she predicted that Gresham would be the one, to fall first into the hole there is because he's a very narcissistic man. So she knows that his narcissism will, make him want to lead the group that he's in. And he's giving this group a tour. So he's definitely going to be at the forefront. So she's not expecting any of the any of the other people that he's with to actually be walking ahead of him. So the fact that he's the one giving the tour, the fact that he's narcissistic enough to, present himself as a leader, she was able to, I guess, accurately predict that he would be at the forefront. And the moment that he stepped on the hole that she made there, he fell through. Now, surprisingly, that fall did not fracture his hip or his legs when he landed there. He was not really affected, but then, she finally tells him, "Hey, I know you're the guy behind all these fires here in South Gotham, and I know that you're scamming these people, and I've got the evidence right here." So she actually found one of his firebombs that I think was probably inside that same building that they were in. And I guess it was supposed to set off at a certain point, probably to prove a point about how highly flammable the buildings are. But yeah, she located his firebomb. And of course, she tosses it back to him, and it just, bounces off him and falls to the ground there. And it just goes off. And we all know what happens to Gresham after that point.
Yeah. It was neat, though, when she's doing the IOQs section, we got the bat shadow silhouette from her costume. We got that sort of projected on the wall. That was really neat. Ashford, what did you think of all this scene?
I was having flashbacks to when we saw in the future Helena Bertinelli, where she was trying to hold on to that mobster and he fell. Mm-hmm. So, this, actually, after reading this, it made me think, and I was just, Helena didn't want this dude to die, but at the same time, what he was about to put in play, it would have had disastrous effects to this day. So this was 1978. Whatever it was that he was going to do, it was going to have ripple effects to August 15th, 2020. So he got stopped, and then they said because of him, people are like, all right, this guy was about to be a philanthropist in South Gotham, and he died because of the infrastructure of what he wanted to fix. In his honor, let's clean this place up and rebuild. So now he's going to be remembered as a good guy. Whereas if he would have lived, he would have hurt thousands and thousands. And then maybe just today, it would be written how we got it wrong. This was a bad guy. And we're going to write down why, because we now understand how infrastructure and bad policies and that kind of stuff is put into play. So maybe if he's in the afterlife, in a George Lucas afterlife looking around or whatever, and he goes, I wish I wouldn't have died in 1978, but, whoa, years later, a good 42 years later, people are looking at me in a good light. Okay. Yeah.
So you didn't have a problem with her not grieving for him then, or feeling bad about it?
Okay. And man, I just had this conversation with Diane about another situation with, I don't like my heroes killing. Unless I'm following Punisher, and that's what he does. Okay, well, I don't have a problem with that.
Well, you can tell initially, her mouth's open, she's sort of trying to reach. You can tell it was a shock. She didn't know it was going to go off.
Yeah, no, she didn't.
It's just the not grieving for it that sort of bothered me. I don't know. What did you think?
I'm going to say this again, and especially everything that we know now. If he could have gotten away with what he wanted to do, maybe the people would still be alive, but they wouldn't be alive well. Mm-hmm. What he was going to do, it was going to ruin
what he'd
lives.
Already done, right? People had already died in these fires.
Again, I want my heroes to, like you're saying, hey, she never thought about it again. I'm not saying I want my heroes to be callous, but what he had done and what he was going to do. I think if I would have read this 15 years ago, I would be like, man, she kind of was whatever about it. But now I am, because I just know when people put things into play, it ruins people's lives for years on, generations on. So I have nothing to say about it.
Diane, I'm sure you've got opinions on this. What do you think?
About Helena Wayne not feeling bad that man died. I think it's just going back to the fact that this version of the Huntress is actually the daughter of the Golden Age Batman and Catwoman. And during the Golden Age, you know, especially in Batman's first year as Batman, Bruce Wayne's first year as Batman, 1939, he actually killed quite a lot of people, and he did not feel bad about the fact that those people died. When he tossed them off buildings, tossed them off roofs, and, you know, at one point he tossed a guy out of a window and you literally see his head split.
Ooh.
That's actually shown in detail. Yeah. So, yeah. I think this is just going back to the idea that, you know, the Golden Age Batman, when he first started, like literally his first year, he was quite brutal in how he fought. And I think, and considering that this is Helena Wayne's first year as the Huntress, you know, she's kind of following a similar path. So even though she would have preferred to save him, you know, she's not like her dad when he first started out, where he just threw guys out of windows, he snapped necks and did all kinds of things. You know, he actually killed people back then, you know, and he did not actually feel bad about that, you know. And this is the same guy that Catwoman, Selina Kyle, married, and she herself ironically never murdered anyone when she was Catwoman. But I think that kind of driving home that point that, you know, this is her first year and she's going to make a lot of mistakes, and she clearly made one in the scene where she tossed the fire bomb back to Gresham, because she was not expecting that bomb to go off, as you said, and she was quite shocked when she saw, you know, what that did to him. She literally watched the man burn to death, but then, you know, after, I guess she reflected, after she had some time to reflect, I guess she realized, you know what, maybe it's a good thing he's not alive, because that means that no more people will have to die. You know, if I have to mourn the death of hundreds of people or one man, you know, I would mourn the hundreds of people who died and the hundreds of innocent people who died, versus the, you know, guy who actually murdered those people. So she's kind of rationalizing the whole thing as, this guy was a terrible person. He destroyed people's lives. I'm not going to shed a tear for this man, you know. So he's dead. That means that no more people's going to suffer. And I guess, you know, this is kind of one of those things that ends up being staple to the Huntress, most notably with the Helena Bertinelli Huntress, because we also saw the same thing happen in the 1989 series, as Ashford pointed out, that when she, with Mandragora, with the first time that she fought him, you know, he fell through a hole in the floor, just like, you know, Gresham did in this story, and Helena Bertinelli did try to save him, and he ultimately fell to his death, you know. And while Helena Bertinelli would have preferred, you know, him not dying and actually facing justice in that story, you know, at the same time she didn't feel too bad over his death. And in her first Justice League story, we see, you know, her do that same smile on her face that Helena Wayne does in this story, where, you know, a bad person died, or an evil person died, and she didn't feel bad about his death. She even had that smirk on her face. And then in later interpretations of Helena Bertinelli, you know, she no longer accidentally kills people. She now actually deliberately kills them. So I think this is one of those things that, you know, becomes staple to the Huntress. So whether or not it was intended to be staple to the Huntress, you know, when she was Helena Wayne, it's hard to say, because back in the Bronze Age, they still had the Comics Code Authority, where they could not depict heroes deliberately murdering bad guys or criminals, but, you know, they had ways around it. And with Helena Wayne, you know, the ways around it was that they always either fell to their deaths by accident, or she accidentally did something that caused them to die. And the way that she responds to those deaths is, okay, well, if I could have, I would have saved him, but at the same time, I don't feel bad that he's dead, you know. And we will see this again during Joey Cavalieri's run especially. But yeah, I think this is Paul Levitt's way of establishing that she's an anti-heroine. She's, you know, at least as a JSA heroine, as far as being a JSA heroine is concerned, you know, she's going to always strive to do the right thing, But she's not always going to be bothered by anything that goes wrong, especially if it results in a criminal death. So I guess he's trying to establish some moral ambiguity with Helena Wayne in the story. With that
I
scene.
didn't think she was smirking so much as looking hopeful to me. Like, I've accomplished this one thing. It didn't go exactly like I wanted, but I have hope for the future. I'll try again. I'll do better. That was the look I took it as.
And another thing, too, is he died and she didn't go home and eat chips. It's like, okay, he died and I went back to work to go do some good. So it's not just I'm callous about his death, but I'm so busy trying to help folks. It just keeps getting into the back of my mind.
I wonder if it would have been better, at least for my sensibilities, if she just hadn't said anything about it at all. If they had, and just leave it up to the viewer, reader, whatever. Let us just sort of interpret what we think from it. I do have a question. It's sort of a little bit to the side. The last time we've had the last two parts of this, we've had that horrible sexist guy that was in the law firm with her.
Oh,
yeah,
gosh.
that was pretty awful. But I feel like they've done something a little bit better towards other things because we have an African-American announcer here on the news program. I thought that was interesting for 78. What did you guys, either one of you pick up on that?
I believe it was the same reporter that we saw in the previous chapters as well. So points for continuity there. And yeah, Roger Damaris is not in this. It's not in the finale of this story. And frankly, the previous issue that we saw him in is the last appearance of the character because we don't see him again after that. Instead, she ends up with new colleagues moving forward. One of which actually becomes more prominent. Well, actually, two of them, and they're both African American. But yeah, I did notice that the news anchor was the same one that we were previously seeing in the previous issues of the story.
I just thought it was nice. I thought it was a good touch that we went from the horribleness of the sexist thing to the more equality looking of this particular reporter. I really liked that. Okay, we've done the bad side of society, and now we got the good side of society. I kind of liked that. Let's go. I wish that we could keep going in that direction, but on the other hand, hey, yeah, the sexist jerks are out there.
And another reason why it was good is because we had a black dude that was a villain. So we get to see a black woman that's being a reporter. So you see that balance. It wasn't just the whole thing about it is if you're going to have someone in a bad light and they're of a certain group, then we need to see people in that group in other ways too. And then it's like, okay, that's cool. Mm-hmm. But if we go 30 issues and we've only seen one and that one was bad, that's the problem.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. I like that. I like that direction that the diversity is there. Because, it's subtle. It's not so overt.
Right.
And that makes it easier to I don't know, makes it easier to accept as part of the book as opposed to something that really sticks out. I just happen to notice it because, I don't know, I'm looking at it with our sensibilities now, I suppose.
Right.
Overall, what did you guys think of the overall story arc as a whole? Was this a good showcase for her? Ashford, why don't you start us off? What'd you think?
I was just going to say, this was a good issue, but if they could be all collected in one entity, is wonderful.
Yeah, I really enjoyed this. I'm glad we're doing the Helena Wayne because she really is a nice, intriguing character. I like that she's trying to find her feet. The scene that we were talking about where she's contemplating what to do next, believe it or not, it kind of reminded me of Spider-Man when he's worrying and fretting and trying to figure out, okay, now what do I do? If they reveal me, how am I going to do this? I've got to stop them. But, I don't want to lose my identity. And it's sort of that whole little scene. I really enjoyed that part. And yeah, the mistake at the end, I wasn't too happy about the whole, I'm not going to cry over it because I think maybe feeling bad about it for a shot would have been a nice thing. But the look on her face when it actually happens, I suppose, kind of redeems that. She really did not intend for this to happen. But overall, it was a good little story. I really enjoyed it. We got the detecting. We got a couple action scenes. We got a little downtime to learn about her apartment with the gym in her apartment and everything. So, yeah, I enjoyed it. Diane, how about you? What did you think of the overall story?
I think it's a great way to showcase Helena Wayne as a solo character and as a potential lead heroine to her own solo story, which is what they were planning to do with Helena Wayne originally. But yeah, I felt that this was a great way of showing, how this character is outside of the Justice Society, because prior to this story, we've only seen her with the Justice Society, with her only solo story being her origin story. So it was great to see, how she actually functions, outside of the JSA, and whether or not she's had quite a bit of experience since the first time we saw her on her first solo case, which was avenging her mother's death. So it was great to see how much the character has evolved in that time span. So we got to see, as you mentioned in the story, we got to see her detective skills. We also got to see her quick thinking skills, especially when she's caught in a dangerous situation that's completely out of her control. We saw a crossbow upgrade in this issue. Before that, she had a blue crossbow, so she upgraded her crossbow, and it's even branded with the Huntress logo. And we actually got to see her flat for the first time, because the last time that we saw her residence, she was actually still residing at Wayne Manor, and so we finally see what's become of her life since she was 19. She was still 19 years old when she was still living with her parents, at the manor. So it was nice to see it's nice to see that she actually moved out at some point and got herself a flat in a nice part of Gotham. And it's a very posh flat. I think it's a penthouse, if I'm not mistaken. So it was nice seeing that, and it was nice to see how the furniture actually is purposely placed, and it actually facilitates her workout. So she doesn't have an actual gym, but she uses ordinary items in that flat as gym equipment or workout equipment. So it was nice to see that. So yeah, we got to see, and I think the most important thing that we saw in this one story is that we get to see what her career actually is. So we actually got to see where she actually works. We did not know that she was a lawyer prior to this story. We knew that she was a university student. We knew that she was I didn't think it was even mentioned that she was a university student, but at age 19 you would assume that she was a university student. And we saw how she behaved as a huntress up to that point, but we never actually saw her civilian life, at least not outside of that lunch scene with Karen in that final issue of All-Star that we covered. So yeah, we never actually saw her in her civies up until this story. So we got to see what her life is like outside of being the Huntress, and we got to see where she actually works, who her co-workers are, and what her workplace experience is, and how that workplace experience ultimately motivated her to continue being the Huntress, because as much as she likes fighting for justice, she feels she's more effective at that, being the Huntress and being as a lawyer, where she has to go through checks and balances and all that stuff. So it was a great story. It was a great, I guess you could say, reintroduction to Helena Wayne as a solo character, because now we've got a more fleshed out narrative for her moving forward, and it serves as a foundation for the character, or rather it serves as a new foundation for the character. And so this is the foundation that Paul Levitz, Joe Staton will be building off from moving forward, and then ultimately Joey Cavalieri as well, even though he kind of ends up taking the character in a new direction when he takes over.
I look forward to seeing that. I look forward to looking at the evolution of this character. We're going to kind of go forward and backwards in time on this podcast and the Right On Network, because the next time you hear from the three of us, we will continue our discussion about America versus the Justice Society of America, where Helena has a prominent role in it. I'm talking about Helena Wayne. So here's some feedback that we received on the Huntress podcast. We got to back up a little bit. This is from July 16th from Tim Price. He's commenting about when we cover Robin 6, Cry of the Huntress. The last issue might have been less rushed if Dixon didn't add King Snake and Lynx to the story, but Dixon really wanted to make that pair into Robin's arch nemesis since they're his characters. Perhaps he thinks of them as a twisted mirror image of Batman and Robin, but they never become that important on their own and are just Dixon's pet villains. So no, I don't like them shoehorned into this issue. And the wrap-up isn't very satisfying. Robin and Huntress don't get to take down KG Beast or the Commissaire and have to let Snake Links go. And the last page with Tim and his dad is also less than satisfying. Everything's resolved just because. Yes, they rescued Ariana and made the counterfeit money useless. But it didn't feel like a win. Sigh. Oh, and you're correct, Laurel. Huntress's V-neck is extremely low cut here. Poor Helena must be spending lots of money on double-sided tape. But yeah. But looking to the future, I think Bertinelli's next costume is my favorite of hers. I am very excited to read America versus the Justice Society for the first time, to follow the show. Looking forward to it. And a great show as always, Hun Trio. What you think about that?
Well, that was fun. I'm glad he agreed with me on the low cut on that she was not being shown in the best light, so to speak. But yeah, I think definitely there was too much going on. I think we commented also when we did the coverage that it seemed to wrap up with them not really having the victory, sort of driving away from the problem, which I wasn't as huge a fan of that part. I don't know about the Robin ending. I think there is a bond between parents and children that things can sort of go by without necessarily having the deep conversations if the parent is willing to go that direction. Yeah, it would have been nice to see it, but I felt like that could have been picked up elsewhere when he starts to go back or something like that. I just got the impression that he had to get this done, and so yeah, it wrapped up, but that one didn't bother me as much as our portrayal of Helena not being as flattering as I think we would have liked. She was just sort of thrown into this story, didn't really have enough of a part in it, and sounds like he thinks the same thing. King Snake and Lynx are just sort of thrown into this story and don't necessarily show them to their best lights either. Diane, what did you think?
I think that I agree with your point about Helena Bertinelli and the way that she's used in the story. It's not really her story, even though the story is called Cry the Huntress. What was she crying about exactly? I don't know. But I do think that, she was kind of a side piece in the story, and the story was really about Tim and his woes as a teenage boy in Gotham, who's also a sidekick. But yeah, I felt that, Helena Bertinelli, when it comes to Chuck Dixon, I don't think that Chuck Dixon really likes the character, to be honest. He doesn't really present her in the best light, but unfortunately he ends up setting the new standard for the character that ends up sticking, which is quite unfortunate, because I think that Helena Bertinelli as a character is actually quite interesting when she's written well. I like the fact that she's a character who very much toes the line between doing what she thinks is right and what she knows other people are going to judge as right. So she toes that line of, I know that what I'm about to do is not going to be approved of, but I also know that if this person stays alive, or if this person continues to run loose, bad things will happen. So she's actually a very complex heroine, but Chuck Dixon just never captures that about her character. Instead, he tries to write her as insecure. So insecure to the point where she needs Batman's approval. And we never saw this during the Joey Cavalieri run, where she actually stood up to Batman and did not actually deal with his nonsense. So yeah, I think that Chuck Dixon's take on Helena Bertinelli is quite regressive from what we previously saw. But fortunately, better writers do come along to make the character a fan favorite, like Greg Rucka and Gail Simone, who offer more varied portrayals of the character that are also more nuanced. So yeah, when it comes to Chuck Dixon, I'm not a fan of his take, to be quite honest. I don't think he has the character's best interest in mind. But he's useful when he wants to prop up another character, in this case Tim Drake. So yeah, not a fan of his take, but fortunately better interpretations come along.
And Tim Price, he mentions about like how he's going to read along when we cover America versus the JSA. We have some people comment about that, but we're going to wait for that podcast. And Tim Price, he also talked about when we last covered Helena Wayne. And he mentions, I really like seeing how great a detective Huntress is, but still capable of rookie mistakes. So she has the skills, but not the experience. Plus, her life out of costume is coming along, and I agree. The page in her apartment was amazing. I wonder when it comes to being a lawyer, does Helena suffer from imposter syndrome? She has the schooling and brains for it, but lacks the confidence. And there's good things she can do as a lawyer that she can't as Huntress, but something's holding her back. So I wonder if we'll see this in the future. And oh, Roger DeMoron has to go. I mean, DeMorris. I'm sorry. I wrote DeMoron by mistake. I can't imagine how that happened. DeMoron. Another great show, Hun Trio. And I'm definitely putting a sound effect when Diane said that this was his last appearance. So I'll be putting some applause sound effects for that.
Yeah, so I think we all agree that Roger was a terrible, character in the story, but luckily this is the last time that we see him. We don't see him again after this, and she actually ends up acquiring new colleagues. But to answer Tim's question, I don't think that she feels imposter syndrome as much as she feels that she just doesn't really feel like she'll be doing her full potential. Sorry, that was a truck that went by. So I think Helena Wayne's problem is that she's very talented as a lawyer, but she also feels like she cannot, realize her full potential as a lawyer. She feels like she can do so much more to prevent crime, as opposed to, just waiting for crime to happen and then fighting an entire, going through the entire legal process, criminal justice process of, prosecuting a case where there's a 50-50 chance that the person can either go to prison or walk away scot-free if the evidence does not support, the crime. So, yeah, I think that from Helena Wayne's point of view, she feels like she can do so much more, and she feels that she can be so much more impactful as a Huntress and as a lawyer, because she doesn't live with the same restrictions as a Huntress that, being a lawyer entails. She has to go through checks and balances. She has to go through an actual process to put a criminal behind bars, and she doesn't have to worry about that as the Huntress. So I guess the more important question here is, can Helena Wayne be the Huntress and still be a good lawyer?
So we're going to wrap this up. Please, these are ways that you can contact us. You can contact us at the website www.thehuntress.podcast.com, where we have some other lovely programs like the Back Row Cassandra Cain podcast on that website, and now the new The Outcasters. It's talking about Batman and the Outcasters, the Outsiders in the 80s. I want to give thanks to some Patreon listeners out there. We have Kay Say. We have Alan W. Wright. He's on Twitter at Bold Outlaw. He is a Robin Hood enthusiast. Give a shout out to Delvin Sims. He does some of the original music that I use at the Right On Network as far as for the podcasts. Tim Price. I do the Cassandra Cain podcast with him, as well as this new The Outsiders project. This is more of his thing, so good luck to him. And Mark Ross, thank you very much. We want to thank those Patreon listeners. Diane and I, we have some Patreon exclusives that you can listen to if you become a Patreon subscriber, where we go over all the episodes for season 1 of Stargirl, which I enjoyed to pieces. You can also reach us on Twitter at Huntress Podcast. That'd be Nito Supremo. And if you listen to this podcast on Apple Podcasts, please give us a 5-star rating and write a review to trigger those algorithms so people can reach us. So until next time, cheers.